In this video, I want to talk about the benefits of the classical guitar playing positions, as well as how it compares to the casual position and who should be playing in the classical position. The classical guitar playing position gives the neck this angle, and I believe that that is an ideal optimal angle for left-hand technique and for right-hand technique. A lot of advanced players use this position. Even if you think about metal guitar players or like heavy metal guitar players and your favorite guitarists, like rock guitarists, you will often find that they're holding the guitars on a strap, but the strap gives them this angle. Advanced guitarists know that there's a benefit to this angle, and how you achieve this angle, it really doesn't matter if you're sitting in a classical position or if you have it on a strap. The difference comes from what guitar shape you're holding. If you're holding a classical guitar, why put it on a guitar strap? Because the classical position is developed for it, it's better for it, versus when you're playing an acoustic steel string guitar that has a much wider and a bigger body. That guitar is not going to feel as comfortable in a classical position, and that guitar is probably more convenient on a strap if you put the strap and then put the guitar neck in this angle. And then of course the electric, well, I don't think it's very convenient in the classical position either, although some of my students have done it. But it also is the type of guitar that probably performs much better if you have it on a strap and then at this angle. So how is the classical guitar position different from the casual guitar position? Well, classical guitar position, you have the left leg raised and the guitar is at an angle. Casual guitar playing position, you don't have the leg raised and the guitar is resting on the right leg instead of on the left leg. And the reason I don't favor this position for practicing, but I do perform this way sometimes because it looks, on some stages it looks more appropriate, but for practicing I always use the classical position. But see what happens here. In order to actually see what I'm playing, I have to bend forward quite a bit. My wrist is going a bit out, it's pointing out way too much, and I have to turn my back into like a wheel in order to actually be able to fret the bar chords, because you have to apply some pressure when you're getting those bar chords. So I'm really pointing the guitar towards the floor in order to get good technique, and a lot of people do that. I've seen that too. That is, you can't call it bad technique because you're still getting an angle, and I've seen quite advanced players play like this, where the guitar is at this angle and they're really low to the ground. But the thing is, I think it's much easier, especially if you're practicing for an hour or two, to achieve correct technique by having the guitar point at this angle, pointing up. That way your back can actually be straight. If you are going to be using the casual position, it is recommended, and it is good casual position etiquette to have your right foot raised. That way you don't have to bend over too much. You can actually still sit straight with your back. Your guitar neck is a bit more straight as well, and your wrist doesn't have to bend out so much. And this is a really good way to use the casual position. Who should use the casual position? Acoustic steel string guitarists, because that guitarist can be quite big and bulky in the body, and it just wouldn't feel comfortable in the classical. So if you have an acoustic steel string, raising your right leg and sitting in the casual playing position is a good solution. The classical guitar playing position gives the neck this angle, and I believe that that is an ideal optimal angle for left-hand technique and for right-hand technique. First of all, who is this position ideal for? Well, of course, for classical guitarists, because the classical guitar techniques have been developed over centuries and they have been passed on from master teacher to the student. And so the techniques have evolved and they have been optimized and modernized, and it makes sense that if you want to learn classical guitar, you should be playing in the classical guitar position, because that's why it was developed. Secondly, the guitarists who want to use the classical guitar techniques to play modern music, such as myself, because my music is rooted in the classical guitar techniques, but I'm not playing a classical repertoire. I'm not playing classical music. I'm playing modern music. I'm playing my own songs. but I'm using the classical guitar traditional techniques to do that. So in a way, adjusting, adapting, reinventing the techniques, but I'm still using the traditional foundations. So it makes a lot of sense for songwriters who want to use fingerstyle techniques and who want to play the classical guitar. That makes a lot of sense to be using the classical playing position. Beginners in general, I think, should be using the classical guitar playing position, especially if they are learning on a classical guitar. Now, as a beginner, you don't have to be learning classical guitar in order to be learning on a classical guitar. Basically, classical guitar is an instrument, a particular body shape, and the nylon strings. It's a repertoire, it's a genre of music, classical music that you play on the guitar, and it's also technique. You can have classical guitar techniques to play modern music. So when you say classical guitar, it can be confusing because it can mean 3 different things. So who should be using the classical guitar position? Well, anybody who is learning on the classical guitar as an instrument, because the classical guitar, in my opinion, is one of the better instruments to learn on because of its nylon strings, which are softer on the fingers, and because you can put it in the classical guitar playing position, which I believe is optimal for beginners. Why would a beginner use classical guitar over an acoustic steel string? Because the strings are softer. They are nylon strings, and when you apply pressure, it doesn't hurt the fingers as much. And when you're first learning, especially playing bar chords, can be quite painful. I work with kids, I teach a lot of kids, and so that's just a policy we have. If you're a beginner, you learn on the classical guitar because it's much gentler on little fingers. And I find for adults as well, you end up practicing a lot more if the strings are actually easier on your fingers. Eventually, as your fingers get tougher, you can switch to any guitar that you want. But when you're learning foundations, you can learn any foundations because foundations are the same for all guitarists. It's a matter of good technique, and especially the left hand technique. It's very similar for whether you play classical or blues or jazz or heavy metal or rock. Left hand is going to be doing the same thing. The difference comes in the right hand, especially for fingerstyle players. The angle of the right hand is going to be important. When you're sitting in the casual position, the angle of your right hand is going to be like this. When you're sitting in the classical, how your arm rests on the body of the guitar, it's going to put it immediately into this position, which is the optimal position for fingerstyle guitar. So if you want to play fingerstyle guitar, whether on an acoustic steel string or on a classical, then this is the optimal position for your left hand. So who should be sitting in the classical guitar position? Classical guitarists, people who want to learn good fingerstyle technique for the right hand, and generally a lot of beginners because it gives you better technique in both hands.